Okay, everyone, the use of force. That's right, the use of force. When can you and when can't you? And that's an easy answer. No one really knows, because that's what makes that chapter in the book so interesting. Now, it focuses on two things, right? Retortion and reprisal. Now, according to the book, which I have right here, which I really like, retortion and reprisal. I like those two terms because they really do stress and kind of highlight that whole entire idea of, well, retortion's a harmful act, right, against another unfriendly state, but it's legal somehow, whereas reprisals are illegal. That's the whole goal of the international lawyer, is to decide, well, obviously they take the case, but to convince the International Court of Justice, the International Court of Law of the Sea, the ICC, that is the International Criminal Court, that there was, right, a legal reason, retortion, to carry out a harmful act. But this gets into a whole huge area, like the current crisis, Russia versus the Ukraine. Russia uses another term in international law, self-determination. It needs to protect the Russians in Georgia, Chechnya, and now the Ukraine. United States used the same argument to invade Grenada, right? They're trying to say, this is okay. We are committing harmful acts. No one's going to deny that. But this is within the scope of international law. But is that the use of force legal? Idea of self-determination, right? Or are they reprisals? We want the Ukraine back. Same thing goes with what's going on in Israel and Gaza, right? We are using force, but this is within the scope of international law because we're trying to root out Hamas, and we're finding all these things. Then the argument is humanitarian law, right? Just like you are an international lawyer, is the incursion of Israel into Gaza, not only the ground offensive, but also bombing in general, are these legal acts? And you have to take one side for Israel and the other side for Gaza. You got to do both, because international law is interesting. I have put a lot of people through school, and they say that that's one of the things. You have to preempt the other side, which is a whole nother idea of the use of force, preemption. This was very, very nerve-wracking for international lawyers when both Israel hit Ozark, that is the nuclear capability of Iraq, and that was like in the early 1980s. And then George Bush obviously invaded Iraq. And then we're still waiting for those weapons of mass destruction. That's called preemptive. But are those legal? Can you just say, hey, I'm preempting something that might happen to me? And this is something within international law, humanitarian law. Right. And then when we talk about the use of force, there's also a question on there about sanctions. See, the use of force isn't just, hey, we're going to invade the Ukraine, Gaza, Afghanistan, etc. There's also the use of force, right, through sanctions. As you'll see from me from the Magdalena River, which is interesting, a lot of people don't know, but way down in another side of the river are Pablo Escobar's hippos. The hippos multiply and really took to the Colombian environment. So am I a hero for doing that lecture in Colombia where I could be eaten by hippos? Yes, I am. But the goal of that lecture is what's going on in Venezuela with the migrant crisis, right? And the idea of sanctions. Should the United States be imposing sanctions on Venezuela? Is that a harmful act? That is a humanitarian disaster, right? Even though you might not like the government, do sanctions work? Then you start thinking Iran. And it doesn't really matter. We had great relations with the Shah, who was a brutal dictator of Iran. We had great relations with Carlos Perez. I mentioned it in the lecture in Magdalena. We basically, funded him with the World Bank, the IMF, etc. And there were Harvard professors in his regime, and he killed up to 3,000 innocent Venezuelan civilians. They kind of downplay it. So if you're an ally, you downplay how many people are killed. And if you're not, we kind of increase the amount of people who were killed. And you saw former President Obama, with Teodoro being the most brutal dictator. So, should we be doing sanctions just because we don't like a government like in Venezuela, or is that hurting the people? That's another use of force that people sometimes don't think about, but like people are literally going through that Darien Gap between Panama and Venezuela to get to the United States. And this is creating an humanitarian crisis. Same thing with what's going on in Gaza. So there are different types of uses of force. So I want you to walk away from this lecture. Number one, you've got the retortion, reprisal, differentiation. One, retortion is legal, but then reprisals are illegal. But how do you differentiate between legality of the use of force? Right? So like the Ukraine will say, yeah, we're using force in the Ukraine, but that's part of Russia and we're protecting people in the Ukraine. But two, we used it too, invasion of Grenada and other places. We say, oh, we were doing this to protect these, as I said in another lecture, these doctors. They were studying medicine or something else. And the other issue is, and this is more important because we haven't talked about, like, what kinds and types of use of force are there? There's not only one type of invasion, right? We're supporting dictators, like I showed you with Teodoro Obiang and President Obama. There's also sanctions, putting on sanctions on Cuba, on Venezuela and other countries just because we don't like them, when we have plenty of friends who are not very democratic, and we just kind of turn our head. Is this kind of use of force legal? And I actually asked that in another discussion board, but I want you to really think from an international lawyer's point of view, are sanctions legal? If it's not, helping, basically you want to change the regime, but it doesn't seem to be working, right? So that, but there's also another use of force. And if you look behind me, a lot of people don't know, this is from the 1800s, Battle of San Jacinto with Andres Castro, who's Nicaraguan. This, I took a picture of the actual painting. This was a painting, throwing a rock and hurting a gringo, what they called filibusteros. These were people who were invading Nicaragua during, people, I might add, not the military. The U.S. military had invaded Nicaragua many times, but people to kind of take it over to build a canal or other things. William Walker declared himself president of Nicaragua. He went in with filibusters, but then he was kicked out by these people, and it's kind of enshrined in Nicaraguan culture. Why do I bring this up? Well, this is another use of force. Another use of force isn't just, hey, invasion or sanctions, but then you have kind of these private militaries going into other countries, right? So as we saw with the Wagner Group, if they have a link to the Russian military or Russian government, even very thin, is that a use of force by Russia in Africa, Ukraine, etc., illegal? Can you link these kind of private military contracts to the government and then go sue the government in the International Court of Justice? Or should these people be taken to the International Criminal Court? So that's very interesting. And we do it all the time. There's a lot of under the table stuff. Angola, if you took another class, we sent people through the CIA to Angola to fight on the brutal Savimbi side, and they were found in Angola to be guilty when they were rooted out, and they were killed, and they probably deserved it because, as John Stockwell once referred to them as psychopaths. The same thing we sent, now I say this loosely because you can debate me on this, but it was found to be in Trump's Mar-a-Lago, or is it Mar-a-Lago, Lago, I don't know, but in his little camp there in Florida, these ex-military people to go and invade Venezuela, and they were caught right away. Is that an act of harmful force against a country, even though it's not the official military? The CIA overthrowing Allende in the early 1970s in Chile. Russia uses the same type of tactics, and I'm sure other smaller countries do as well. These kinds of they're with us, but they're not really with us kind of thing. Like they're part of the state, but not like paramilitaries and other groups. So the United States used this. His name's slipping my mind, but he went to Nicaragua to help the Contra and also do other things. And he was caught by the Sandinista government in Nicaragua in the 1970s. Now, you don't have to understand all this, the goal here is to understand that the use of force is not just limited to, like, say, an invasion or military force. We use other ways, that is big countries in particular, to go into countries, fake NGOs. We use, the United States has a broad apparatus, NED, all these things, that is, the National Endowment of Democracy, etc. USAID, where they help civilian groups, which is really just an opposition that we don't like in a country. Is this harmful use of force? And this is a really interesting argument. And that was what was taken to the Nicaragua in the International Court of Justice, where they were sending these people down. It's called paramilitaries, right? Well, they were supporting paramilitaries, the Contra, and that was illegal. And also they were mining the ports of Corinto. So it's very interesting. And we did the same thing, CIA in the Congo, after it got independence from Belgium. There was a man named Patricia Lumumba. Patricia Lumumba was a very progressive, popular local politician, and the CIA went down to kill him. The rumor is that the CIA guy actually refused to kill him. But, we tried to kill Castro, and now we got sanctions on Venezuela, etc. And then obviously Russia has its Wagner group. I don't know how that is going now, since the guy died mysteriously in a plane crash. But these paramilitary groups can be linked to the state, and then a state can take another state to the International Court of Justice. And is it legal to have sanctions on states? And obviously, is it legal for, say, Russia, Israel, the United States, and all these bigger states to go and invade other states? This becomes a huge issue, right, on the use of force. So the use of force, not as definable as we would like, concrete, because there are a broad spectrum of uses of forces. Stopping someone's exports from coming to our country, because we're a big country and economic. That means that we can cause a lot of harm to other countries by putting on an embargo or something like that. I knew people in the Cuban embassy when I was a professor in Nicaragua, and they would always say, "Oh, if you didn't have the embargo on us, we would be the sanctions, etc. We would be the best country in the world," or something, which is their propaganda. But regardless are these harmful acts, and that's something you have to consider as an international lawyer, and what is ethical and legal in the international system. So everyone, thanks so much. It was a big honor that you watched my lectures. Well, I hope maybe some of you. So the goal here: retortion, reprisal, use of force, not that easy as just invasions. We have sanctions under the table, paramilitaries, these private contractors. We actually pay people to go down, like we did to Venezuela recently, about a few years back, to overthrow the government. It failed miserably. I believe those people still sit in a Venezuelan court now. We overthrew Allende, kind of through supporting Pinochet, and then using the CIA. We use excuses for a lot of this use of force. Is it legal? When we say something, oh, we have to go into Libya with NATO and overthrow Gaddafi. Is that legal? Was the Iraq war legal? It went from, oh, we're doing it for a preemptive strike, weapons of mass destruction, and we're going to find those weapons of mass destruction. Then it became, oh, wait, democracy. So, these are the issues that as international lawyers, we really, really struggle over. So a lot of these answers should be decided by you in your own research, opinion, etc. So take care, everyone. And, any questions, please leave them in community forum.